Hi everybody, today I'm going to show you how I like to edit scanned film that I shoot with my film cameras. So for this demo, I am going to use color Kodak Portra 160 film that I photographed a couple summers ago while traveling in Europe. So this particular picture is in Sicily. And I'm going to just walk you through how I like to clean up my photos. So some of this is going to be review and some of it's going to be new. And for my photo one kiddos, you guys haven't worked with color film, so feel free to stop if you feel overwhelmed and just do the steps that you kind of remember from class. Otherwise, just kind of play along and you'll get a little bit of an advanced technique. The first thing I like to do when I'm starting editing film is I like to clean up the dust. And so I'm very superstitious. So what I like to do is duplicate my layer because I don't like to do my edits directly on the original layer. In case I make a mistake, then I have the layer below. Right now I have active my spot healing brush tool, and I cleaned up a bunch of the dust already, so you don't have to watch me clean it all up, but I'm just going to move through and clean up some of these other larger pieces of dust that I can see. And if I want to make my brush smaller, I'm using the left bracket, and if I want to make it a little bit bigger, I'm using the right bracket key on my keyboard. Okay, so that seems to be a lot of the big kind of noticeable, wow, you know how spot toning is. As soon as you get rid of some, you see more. This seems to be almost all of it now. Okay, and as I'm editing, if I see more, I can always come back to it. So this particular film has not been edited at all. All I did was shrink the size down so that I could put it on canvas for you guys to download and the files are not overwhelming. At this point, I like to flatten my layers just so I have them merged together so I don't have that nasty kind of like one with the dust on it anymore. Now this is going to become my new background. I personally like to use levels for color balancing because it has the histogram in it. And I'm going to explain to you why in just a second. So to access that, I can go to adjustments and click on levels here, or I can go down here and add an adjustment layer by clicking on levels right there. Okay. So right now our histogram popped up, and the histogram is basically a picture of where all of our values are falling on the scale. So we have our highlights, our midtones, and our shadows, okay? And I'm going to specifically work with breaking apart the RGB levels so that I can focus on controlling them to get the color balance back to where I remember it being when I first took this photo. So what I'm going to do up here is just separate into each individual color layer. And what I want to do is I want to pay attention to these end triangles and see if they're falling off the histogram or right at the start of the histogram. Okay, so basically what that means is you could see that the shadow triangle is kind of slightly off of the histogram right where it first starts to go up, where that mountain starts to crescendo. So what I want to do is just bring this in until it just touches the edge, and you're going to see that there's a little bit of a color shift that started to occur. This side over here doesn't really start to go up until right about there, so I'm going to bring it in just a little bit. And the reason why I like to use levels is because if I don't have that histogram in my view when I'm doing this and I start to move my slider in, it actually starts to affect the image in a negative way. And if my eyes are tired and they're seeing a lot of color, I really kind of can't see some of those weird shifts that are occurring. So this kind of keeps me honest in my editing. Then I'm going to go over to the green. And I noticed that this just needs to be brought in just a little bit here, but that really started to make some really nasty kind of green tones pop into my image. So I'm actually going to put that back and leave it be. I'm going to go over to my blue and I'm going to just slide this over. Now I'm going to keep an eye on this because I really want that sky to have that blue pop. But then I'm going to go back to my red. And the reason why is now I want to mess with my middle tone. I know that the field was really kind of warm and lush, so I'm going to bring my middle tones over a little bit to the left to kick up that red tone a little bit. And I'm just keeping an eye on those clouds just to make sure they don't get too much warmth in them. And I really kind of like that right there. And what I can do is go down to the eyeball on my layer, on my levels adjustment, and I can click the eyeball just to toggle off, before, and then on. At this point, I'm going to use my levels panel to also mess with my exposure. Some people have different ways of doing exposure, but I prefer to use my levels because it has a picture again of my histogram where my highlights, my midtones, and my shadows are falling, so I don't make any errors when it comes to removing information in the highlight or removing information in the shadow, or in other words, clipping. So clipping would be, and first thing I'm going to do is actually bring it back to the RGB because I wanted to affect all of those different color layers. Clipping is when you drag the outside sliders in, and what happens is you start to actually lose information. So in here you'd be losing it in the shadows, and if I brought it back out and I brought this in on the highlight side, I'd be losing information in my highlights. So again, just to keep myself honest, what I'm going to do is really kind of mess with this middle tonal range. So I'm going to pull my mid-tones over to the right to give them a little bit more of a lush kind of look, because I know those shadows were a little bit deeper because it was midday and the sun was shining directly overhead. And again, I'm just going to come down and just toggle again. That's my before, my starting point, and this is my after. And this is starting to look so much more like the day actually did. So at this point, what I'd like to do, because I'm actually finished with my color balance and my exposure, I'm going to flatten my image and get ready for saving. I did notice one more piece of dust right there in the center in the cloud. But this tutorial is just basically about loading your scan negative, cleaning up the dust, and color balancing it and working with the exposure using the level adjustment layer. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you guys have any questions, and I cannot wait to see your edits.